right. Hi, how you doing?
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Excited for this evening.
Oh my gosh, this is going to be so much information. I'm super excited.
It is. Going through it, when I sent you my notes, I was like, oh, it's about 11 pages.
I was like, I'm going to combine this as much as I can.
Yeah, it's a lot of information, but I'm looking forward to it.
Hey, everyone. Glad you're here.
Great. So let's see who's here today. Oh, I see Adriana was first this evening, saying it's going to be awesome. It absolutely is. So that's going to be a great time. The podcast was here earlier. We're happy you're here. Cheers to you.
Cheers.
Yes. And as we're sitting here, I'm actually sipping on a Midwinter Night's Dram to get started this evening.
I have a little Baker's 7, just sipping on it.
Nice. I have not had that.
It's so good. It's just a good all-around bottle.
Let's see, we have Bourbon Baller. Cheers. Cheers to you. All right. Tim Evans, it's always good to see you. Cheers to you.
Hello.
We have Savor Vita Elsa. Cheers, lovely ladies. Just left MASH to join y'all for Whiskey Serial Killer Wednesday. We're happy you're here. And thanks for joining us. All right. My Whiskey Lab. This event is past my bedtime. Just stopped in to hit the like button. Cheers all. Well, we appreciate it. My Whiskey Lab. Cheers to you. And thanks for stopping by and hitting that like.
Get some sleep.
Absolutely. We have the experienced whiskey old guy. Cheers. Cheers to you. I'm glad you have stopped by. I've seen you over in Cheech's chat. So we're glad that you're here visiting with us today. Yeah. Slapshot Brian. Cheers all. Hope all are doing well. I'm doing well. So cheers to you. I hope, Michelle, you're doing well. Great.
Doing well.
Awesome. We have Robot Scott. I have never understood people with fear of clowns. We will go into that. It is interesting.
I think we may have lost a few viewers just because of the clown.
Yeah. All right, Cohen. Greetings, women of whiskeys, and be careful. Whiskey Mountains may be carrying her toothbrush shank. Don't nobody say nothing bad about Bob or Beam in general.
Speaking of Whiskey Mountains, I think she is ready to join our stream. She's our special guest tonight.
Absolutely. We are very happy and honored to have her with us tonight. She has a great channel. You should definitely check it out. So let's bring her on.
Hopefully, if I have a mod in there, if you could drop that link for Whiskey Mountains.
Absolutely. Hi,
Adriana. That'd be cool. What's up? I'm so excited for tonight.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. You're like my favorite true crime fanatic that just the things that you talk about on our streams are on point every time.
Yes.
Yep. I'm always having fun like in the chat and being like, oh my God. So it's cool to not have to type it out.
Because I can see all your comments. Because a lot of times I don't get to see them when we're going through the beats and stuff. So when I go watch the replay, I can see the conversation and it's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's
like delayed by the time you see it.
Chat and tell the story with all the information, and I always go back and rewatch it.
I was thinking that when y'all sent me, some of the notes on this, I was like, oh, like looking back and forth at that, but then also trying to pay attention to chat. That'll be a feat.
It's fun.
It absolutely
I do want to see, is Bourbon in here? Because Bourbon's helping us out tonight. Is he in the chat yet?
Let me see if he's
Bourbon, if you're here, let us know. He's going to be tracking our giveaway tonight. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about the giveaway.
Yes, it is. It's a good one. It's a good one. Yeah. I'm kind of jelly. I don't get to be in it.
Okay, yeah. Not as good as next week with all the mega merch, but it's still pretty good.
It is good. It is good. Absolutely. Let's see. Bourbon.
Do you want to mention that about next week and what it's going to be for?
Yeah. Real quick, I see that Bubble Bath Bourbon has his cocktail ingredients he's going to be drinking along with us.
Oh, I forgot the caramel drizzle.
Oh, nice. Bubble Bath Bourbon. That's fantastic. I'm happy that you're going to drink it with us.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So yes, please talk about that mega merch giveaway that for next week. That's exciting.
It is. So we are doing a mega merch giveaway next Wednesday. A bunch of the community of the whiskey channels have, put in on the merch giveaway. We have a lot of really good channels putting in t-shirts and Glens and Glen caps and all different types of merchandise. And we're going to be raising funds for a really good cause. And it's going to be a really good time. And I hope everyone will come join us. And all these really good channels are going to be involved as well. And I'm very fortunate that we are surrounded by such great people.
And the best part is all of the proceeds are going to go to a charity that's really close to my heart. And a lot of people have not heard of it. It's the CASA and GAL Association. And real quick, because I know we have a lot to cover tonight, but this is an organization that is the voice of children. So children that are going into foster care or they've been subject to abuse or neglect, these advocates go into court and they are solely the voice of the kids. They're not an attorney. They're not for the state. They're not for the parents. And they are just there for those kids. It's all volunteer. They go through these, intensive training, and they are just underfunded, underrecognized. And so I really hope that we can get some money to this organization. And we have so many channels that are giving so much stuff. We're talking barrel picks and merchandise and sample packs. And I'm so grateful that everyone jumped on board.
Absolutely. It's amazing how everyone just pitches in and doesn't even bat an eye at it. And I'm very impressed of everyone that has been involved.
I love this community.
I love this cause. That's such a great idea. I hadn't heard of it either. But did you see what my whiskey lab said in the chat? His wife was a CASA in law school.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
That?
So that's awesome. I didn't know what it was either.
When a family that I knew had 3 children that were in the system, and only 2 of those kids could get a representative because they just didn't have the means to get that 3rd representative for the 3rd child. And I went, that is not okay. We can do better.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Crazy.
So if you'd like to get into tonight's giveaway real quick, I'll tell you what that is. I don't see Ben in the chat. I will track it on my side until someone can pick it up. So we do have in the description the PayPal and Venmo link. Every $5 will get you into the giveaway. Let me tell you what we're giving away real quick. So we're going to do 3 sample packs. There will be 3 winners. The first sample pack will be 3 samples of 3 different Bookers from this last year. The next sample pack will be an E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof, E.H. Taylor Straight Rye, and E.H. Taylor Small Batch. And then the third one is going to be 3 different Stag Juniors. And then there will be a bonus sample of the Drunken Bean in there for each one. The Drunken Bean is what we're featuring tonight in our cocktail.
Absolutely.
So please go ahead and if you do enter, tag Women of Whiskeys until we see if Ben's here or not. Maybe he's not coming, but tag Women of Whiskeys. I'm also going to have my PayPal and my Venmo pulled up so that I'll make sure you all get into the drawing.
If I can easily track along.
Yeah.
Honestly. Yeah. I did it last night on Bourbon Judges and it actually went pretty smoothly. No problem.
You're so much better at it than me. You're like the queen of that crap.
Oh, okay. You're just amazing, Adriana.
So let's tag. Do you want Whiskey Mountains tagged, Adriana? Is that the best?
Yeah. Yeah. Just tag at Whiskey Mountains. And try not to tag me if I'm talking. If I'm like doing a spiel about Gacy.
I will also track in my PayPal. We will make sure every entry gets in. Again, every $5.
Yeah, we'll double check the totals at the end. That way we can, make sure nobody gets missed just because I'm yapping.
Yeah. And then if I have a mod that can drop those donation links, that would be awesome. They are in the description as well. So with that, I'm going to go real quick into the Drunken Bean. I know a lot of you haven't heard of it. And I know there's a lot of people in chat. I see that Jen is highlighting you. I'm sorry that I'm reading as best I can and talking. So.
Oh,
okay.
Bourbon is here.
Oh, yay. Bourbon is here.
We're glad you're here.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to show you real quick the Drunken Bean. Mm-hmm. What this is, Jen has a bottle too. They were kind enough. I reached out to them. They are a local distillery, Centerfire Distillery. They're local in Idaho where I'm at. So they're very small. They do corn whiskey. And I really wanted to highlight them because it's just a neat story. So the Drunken Bean is a collaboration between Centerfire Distillery and Claudia Hoyser. Claudia is, and this is where the story was interesting to me. She is an up-and-coming country singer. She opened for Miranda Lambert, Blake Shelton, Ryan Bingham, a few other ones that I just can't remember off the top of my head. She's getting ready to open for Toby Keith and someone else. Who is it? Randy Houser. So she's a really neat lady. She's only 24 years old and totally making a name for herself. And they started noticing in her videos that she always had a coffee pot, or she was just addicted to coffee like so many of us. And someone reached out and went, do you want to try making coffee? So they created Hoyser Coffee, and Centerfire, they're a family-owned distillery. They were like, we could do so much with this. Let's take this coffee and make something amazing. And Drunken Bean was born. So it is a coffee-infused whiskey liqueur. It is 70 proof. And we're going to use this to make our whiskey caramel macchiato. You can find her on Instagram, YouTube. If you like country music, which I like all kinds of music, it's pretty great. She's got a new one that's coming out on her YouTube channel. I think she released it. It's pretty cool. So check it out if you get a chance. You know me, I'll tell you how it is. If I don't like it, I won't plug it. So tell us about the cocktail, Jen.
Sure. So it is called the Drunken Bean Caramel Macchiato. It was actually done by Vincent San Nicolas. He created this for them, and it's really easy. It's just your rocks glass, some ice. You're going to have 2 ounces of your Drunken Bean coffee liqueur, 2 ounces of cream. You're going to have a half an ounce of vanilla syrup. And then you're going to mix that, and then you put a drizzle of caramel syrup over it. And I guess that's not it.
Okay.
And when you taste it, I had it yesterday as well, and it does taste like a caramel macchiato.
Lil, you really are a mod.
I made one, and that's my drink at Starbucks because I don't really like coffee normally. I love an iced caramel macchiato. Doesn't matter how cold it is outside, and this legit tastes like a perfect iced caramel macchiato with a little bit of buzz.
I didn't know if it was going to go that route, because a lot of times when you have drinks that say, "Oh, it tastes exactly like something else that you've had," there's always something off-putting on it.
Yeah.
This just tastes like the drink you would get. It just has a little liqueur in it instead of coffee syrup or anything.
Yeah.
Okay. So
caramel macchiatos are too sweet to you. This will probably be too sweet to you too.
But I know you guys made your drinks already. I'm making mine right now.
Oh, good. You're gonna have a freshie.
And so this is where we are so far. And this is
there you go.
My caramel drizzle.
Yeah. Oh, look at all fancy.
Like I knew what I was doing.
There you go.
This is my whiskey caramel macchiato.
Very nice. That looks professional there, Michelle.
I know.
Right? Straw and all.
I know. Well, the straw's just a vehicle to get it in there quicker.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm gonna mix it up.
Ooh, it is. It's like a Starbucks caramel macchiato with a kick.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Like I said, I was surprised at it.
It needs whipped cream and a chocolate covered espresso bean. Very good.
Yes, prescription bourbon. They should add alcohol. Now Starbucks just needs to add alcohol.
That's what a flask is for.
Oh, Lilith is asking, is that the Ghirardelli caramel syrup?
It is.
There you go.
And then I just used, you can use any of the syrups that you would put in a latte for your vanilla. I used a sugar-free Kiss and Tell vanilla.
Or it turns out if your store really sucks and doesn't even sell any of the flavored syrups for coffee, you can actually just make simple syrup and add vanilla extract, it turns out. That's what I did. And
You're
it
so
actually
smart.
like,
Oh, very nice.
I just Googled. I'm not that smart.
Yeah,
I just Google everything.
It's because you're Dr. Adriana.
My job is just research and Googling everything. That's it. Yeah, this is good. Oh. Actually, I have all the ingredients next to me for a refill, and I might make a refill.
I can't hear you, Michelle.
There we go.
There you go.
So the way that we picked this case, so we are doing the John Wayne Gacy case. He was dubbed the Clown Killer, but really there's not that much about clown in this story. But Adriana, being our special guest, we let her pick 4 cases that she was really interested in. And then our Patreon got to vote on that. So those of you that are patrons of our channel do get to vote on the cases that we do. So if you're interested in that, check out our Patreon page. It's only the minimum of $4 to have voting power on that. So that is how we ended up with this. So Adriana, do you want to kind of run us through just the summary of what we're going to get into?
Yeah, totally. Sorry. Putting that in just in case bourbon wasn't totally set up yet. But yeah, so we're going to talk about John Wayne Gacy. For me, this has been, I mean, he's one of the most prolific serial killers of the United States in the world, really. But just one that I found fascinating forever. So he actually had, they believe, at least 33 victims. And his spree basically was from 1971 to 1978. So kind of that serial killer era, if you think of it that way.
Everybody's killing everybody.
That was like the time to get away with it, basically.
Before social media and everything.
Exactly, before everybody knew to be so paranoid about it and all the technology. So, but yeah, he killed mostly younger men and teenage boys, but he would assault and strangle them. It was mostly asphyxiation, and he was eventually convicted, and we will get down to that and his just rewards. So, but he's one of those interesting ones where it's like he really was a part of the community, and very well known, had parties all the time at his place, was involved in politics, was involved in this large social group, the JCs, whatever it's called. Like he was very much a part of the community. And I did make a sign for Scott Pigsley here. So
Nice.
He was known. He was known in the community. He was known in the community for playing a clown. But like that wasn't that involved with his actual murders. He was just known in the community for that. So Scott, now it is safe to unmute. You're safe now.
I love it. I love it.
That's fantastic. I love your signs.
I had to make it real quick before this. Help out, Scott.
So, Adriana, what was it about this particular case that had you so interested in it?
I think a large part of it was like the fact that it was in his house. Most of the bodies were buried underneath, like just the idea, like having seen some of the footage of them, coming out of this house, and it's just in a neighborhood and just it was, I think 29 were actually under the house. Like it just mind-boggling to me that anybody could live in that house. And I'm glad the house has been demolished since then. But yeah, the whole just of that, and that and I'm sure we'll touch on it, but that other people lived in that house, for parts of that era. Like,
what? Yeah, yuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was when I think like part of all like the research that I did and all the podcasts and stuff that I listened to, I think that's one of the things that stuck with me is that there were several different individuals that lived in that house during that time frame. And it's very recognizable smell. It's not something that you're just like, oh, what the hell is that? Like, it's not like a wondering smell. Like, it's a very specific type of smell on that.
Yeah, and they were like, he kept saying, oh, it's sewer, just throw some lime down there, and I don't know, yuck.
Yeah, I kept claiming it was like water leaking and pooling there and just bacteria forming, and that's what it was like, I'm sorry, what kind of water leak do you think is happening?
No. There's a distinct
the local morgue.
I don't see how anybody could mistake that.
Oh. Yeah, that's true. And for such a long period of time, you know, it's not like, oh, for a couple of days it smells, you know, it that's a few month long process. And if you're continuing it and reinitiating it throughout that, it just, I like not to put any blame on, you know, the other people who at some point lived in there. Like that's kind of a crazy thing to think about your significant other or son-in-law or whoever.
Yeah.
But like, it's just one of those, how does that get missed?
Yeah.
So Roxanne was stating they demolished, then a new one was built, and it was up for sale, I think, last year.
Oh, who would want to?
I don't think I could
do that ground.
Mm-mm.
The underground,
yeah,
like the soil.
Right. I feel like turning that into like a memorial area or something, or just like a concrete pad forever. Like
let's put some storage units on it.
Yeah, like just I don't know.
Well, let's get into it, ladies.
Absolutely.
Shall we? Okay. So John Wayne Gacy, he ended up becoming one of the most well-known serial killers just because of the amount of people that were killed and the fact that no one suspected him. Everybody loved him. He was a pillar of the community. He was rubbing shoulders with political people and socialites. It's crazy. This guy just blended in so well. No one had anything bad to say about him, really. So in 1942, he was born in Chicago. He had a dad, also John Gacy, and his dad was really domineering, abusive, liked to humiliate him, kind of beat on him and his siblings and his mom, just not a nice guy. You know, your typical asshole drunk dad. But his mom, Marion, she was like the nurturing, loving, you know, he kind of depended on her to get any kind of love that he needed, but yet tried so hard to please his dad. You know, we hear these stories, right? Of it's like breeding ickiness, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's the whole, you know, nature versus nurture thing. And you can argue on either side of it. And I think that's one of the things that people think about or naturally think about when they first hear of these crimes and they look into people's past is, you know, what were these contributing factors to look at? But then on the other side of it, there's people that go through that same kind of thing that turn out to be great humans that are, you know, contributing to society on a positive level. So
yeah. Well, and that's where for me, one of the things that's always interesting is in a lot of these level of horrible people, you see like some kind of head trauma at a young age or repeated head traumas throughout their, you know, sort of developing years. And it just, you know, that's a hard thing to study, right? Like,
yeah, I mean,
really
there's
just
so many different things.
monitor that. Yeah. But
I think it's
it makes you wonder if that helps. Yeah. Like, you know, with the people who have gone through such things and not, you know, and done the opposite and made something of themselves and, you know, become a better person and decided not to be like their parent, you know, it makes you wonder if that's part of what is the difference there. Like that sort of head trauma. I don't know.
Well, so he also had a heart condition. So he couldn't play sports or play games. He was kind of on the chunky side. So, you know, he had the bullying going on from the neighborhood kids. And then he had his dad beating on him when he got home. basically his life sucked. And so, he finally got sick of it. And in 1962, he decided, screw this, I'm out of here. And he moved to Vegas, and he went there and he worked as a mortuary attendant. So he's working in a morgue and he's all effed up in the head. And there was a body and he cuddled up to it and like snuggled. And then he went, oh my God, that's not normal. It freaked him out. So he like left and went back home and moved back in with his mom, and then went to Northwestern Business College and graduated like in 1963. So there's that part of him that went, that's not freaking normal, but I liked it. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think it was a male that, and I think part of that inner conflict for him was that his dad was very, very homophobic. And so identifying any, homosexual tendencies within himself caused all kinds of things, which is just another reason this kind of prejudice is stupid.
Yeah, I mean, he loved his mom so much that he would wear her underwear and stuff. Yeah. And they talk about, had his dad ever caught him, he'd have beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, the only thing his mom did, though, was when she finally caught him was she made him wear him to school. Kind of like, you don't want to, like, hang out with my underwear all the time. Because it seemed after that point there wasn't any more of him doing that. It was kind of like that punishment, and then it either stopped or he just never got caught.
Yeah. Either way, he was definitely more careful.
Yeah, just a little bit. But his dad really put it into him like, that is not normal. That is not okay. You're less of a person if you are gay. Like, he was beat that into him at a very, very young age. And so he, even like to the point where even before he was executed, he would only come out and say that he was bisexual, because in his brain, it wasn't as bad as being completely gay, because then it wouldn't be anything from his dad. Like, he wouldn't be getting any more hate. It was just like, it's not that, it's this. So it's kind of like his loophole for himself mentally, to even admit that he would be with young men and boys. Yeah.
So here's the thing, though. He joined the U.S. Chamber, the United States Junior Chamber, the JCs. Yes. So he joined this organization and he like moved up really fast, ended up being like vice president of its chapter. And this organization was all about developing young men's leadership skills through service. So it was all about helping young men become men. And he was very well respected in this. And so in 1964, he gets married. He marries Marilyn Myers, and they were co-workers, I think, when they met. And he went to work for her dad's, he owned some KFCs. So he went to work at Kentucky Fried Chicken and became the manager. And I think he was doing pretty good there. He hired a lot of young men. There was a couple little accusations of a little bit of inappropriateness there, if I remember right. And that's his dad-in-law. So the fact that you're even considering being inappropriate when you work for your father-in-law is a little freaking risky, I say.
Yeah. And he was actually running and managing 3 different KFCs around the area. And he did very well at it. And it's something that, he didn't finish high school. So now he's being successful in a way where he's like, okay, I'm married. I'm running these 2 businesses. I have all this responsibility, but I can't squash one feeling that I have. So in being able to hire teenagers, because that's who generally works at fast food restaurants. So having that where it wasn't weird, being like, oh, I'm surrounded by all these young men. Now, keep in mind, he's only in his 20s at this point. So him being like early 20s, hanging out with 15 and 16-year-olds, I mean, it's still a little weird, but nothing where adults are going to be like, oh, that's real strange. Like, he's not 40 hanging out with 15 and 16-year-olds. So I think there was a little bit more give on that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Though I will say, like, everybody gets creeped out by the clown part, but the fact that he made his employees call him the Colonel creeps me out so much more.
Hi, Colonel. I'm here for work.
Colonel. Oh, just no. No, red flag. Red flag.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a bunch of red flags that people would kind of just let go over the years, that if they kind of would just paid a little bit more attention, some things might have been avoided later down the line. But it was more like, oh, whatever. They kind of just let it go. It was kind of like, we talked about it. It's fine. It was never anything more than that.
So then I think things kind of started taking off in his weird factor at that point.
Yes. So around August of 1967 is when he lures a teenage boy named Donald to his home. So they were going to drink alcohol and watch porn and hang out. Kind of a weird evening to hang out and do, but that was something that he did, and assaulted him in his home and then dropped the boy off. So, and what made it even worse on top of him doing this is that Donald was actually the son of a gentleman that was in the JCs with Gacy. So it was someone that he knew. It was someone that he had seen around. And so to Gacy, he was like, he's not gonna say anything because, you know, I know his family, his dad, we're on the JCs together, we hang out. And
this poor kid, I mean, he was he's a prominent figure. This kid's probably like, I can't say anything.
Right. And the other thing about the JCs is that what he did in the JCs was recruitment, was to bring more members into the JCs, to build this community, to bring more outreach and, more, politics and things like that, and to, do good things in the community. But the way he did it was he'd have all the dads come over, they'd go to the hotels, they'd have parties, and they, have orgies. So they'd have all these parties and they do all this really creepy crap together. And then when it's over and he's like, oh, well, now you're going to join the JCs and you're going to do this, that, and the other. Or, hey, I'm going to go ahead and tell your wife we were just hanging out and I've seen you with some females and things like that. So his base was really big, so he had the blackmail aspect. So with going for Donald, he really thought it was kind of going to be a safe bet because he didn't think he would ever talk because of all the information that he had within all of the dads in the community.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the amount of watching porn together that he used as like a reason to hang out or reason to join the JCs was just bizarre. Like, I don't know if that was just a big fad in the 70s.
To be honest with you, I don't know. I found it extremely odd, but it seemed to be like a pastime around, at least with Gacy and the people that he was hanging with. It was, hey, we're going to get drunk and watch porn. Yay. Sounds like a great time.
They're probably like, free alcohol? I'll watch some naked people for free alcohol. Okay.
Yeah. So you're like your teenage boys and they're like, yeah, whatever. I'm going to, drink beer. I'm going to get drunk and it's not be any big deal.
So Duffus Dogs has a good point. There was no cell phones or nobody's snapping pictures of that crazy ass shit that you're doing back then, right? So,
absolutely.
Don't tell.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So then, if I remember right, this kid did end up telling his dad.
Yes. So it actually took him about 6 months. And then he finally broke down and told his dad like everything that had happened. And with doing so, his dad's like, well, no. So they went to the police, they reported everything. They went to Gacy. And at first he was like, no, I didn't do that. He's like, I don't know what they're talking about. That never happened. And so as they were going back and forth, then he said, that it was consensual. And then when they were going back, there's no way it was consensual with the amount of trauma that this boy has. And then he said, well, you know what? I was set up by Donald's father because he wants to be the president of the JCs.
Yeah.
So he's coming after me for this because he wants to be the president of the JCs community.
That's what you do when you have political aspirations. You accuse people of being a pedophile.
Absolutely. And so
when you're the one guilty of it.
Yeah. So in between there in February of 1968, Edward Lynch was actually come on to by Gacy. He was not interested in this at all. Unfortunately, Gacy overpowered him, chained him to a cot, assaulted and strangled him. The teen pretended to black out. Gacy got freaked out, woke him up, and drove the kid home.
Yeah. He's like, oh, my bad. Want to go home?
My bad. I didn't mean to almost strangle you and strap you to this board. Let me go ahead and take you home.
And later, people talk about seeing a board with chains and stuff on it.
The board is...
It was actually hoisted onto the ceiling.
Yeah.
Is where he kept it.
It's nightmare material. Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it was not a good time. So they didn't indicate him at first on Donald's charges. So then Gary came to the police and was like, hey, this is what happened to me. This is what he did. So they finally were able to get the police involved in it. And he was indicated on charges against the teenagers. So on top of this, so he didn't want to go to jail, obviously. So now that he's indicated on these assault charges against this young man, Gacy decides to hire one of his employees, his name was Russell, to beat up Donald so that he wouldn't show up to court to testify against him. So Russell's like, okay, I'm good to go. I can do it. You're going to pay me money.
Like $300 or something, right?
Yeah, $300. Russell was 18 years old. He's like, sure, no problem. So he lured Donald to the woods. He pepper sprayed him, punched him in the face, but luckily Donald got away. So he went to the police. The police fined Russell, and Russell's like, look, Gacy told me to beat up this kid because he didn't want him to testify at this assault trial. So he was additionally charged with conspiracy assault. And due to that, in December of 1968, Gacy was convicted and sentenced to 10 years. At this time, his first wife had filed divorce and took the kids. Gacy was like, you're dead to me because you're leaving me, which I don't think they really cared at that point personally. So she decided, I'm getting out of this. He didn't want a relationship with his kids after that. So unfortunately, Gacy only did 18 months of a 10-year sentence because he was a model prisoner and he get in trouble.
Manipulative asshole.
You know, he was just great. But at the same time, if you think about how he was on the outside with everyone in the JCs, all the people that he had conned up to this point, all of the success that he had had to this, and then it was just dropped because he got found out for being a really shitty person and assaulting young men.
Yeah.
So while he was in prison, his dad had died in 1969. He had filed a petition to go to his funeral, and he was told, no, you can just sit in jail. We don't care that your dad died. You're staying. But he was only out.
Freaking didn't like him at all.
Yeah. And he was out a few months later after his dad had passed. So his dad passed in 69, and Gacy was out on the streets again by 1970.
Yeah.
It's like the most frustrating thing. Yeah, it's like one of the most frustrating things that you see time and time again in these cases where it's like, oh, and then he went to prison and he was sentenced to this long, but he only served 18 months because he was a model fucking prisoner. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what does that have to do with what he did and the horror? Like, what makes you think that when you're watching him and he can't get away with doing anything, that means he's truly like in 18 months rehabilitated?
He's a good guy now.
He's like, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah. And with how violent the attacks were, you know, how young the victims were, like, how are they? It's so annoying to me.
Yeah. So then he gets out, right? And starts living this normal life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So then so at that point, right, he got out. And at that point, he moves to a new city, I think, in Illinois, which is the house where everything else happens, and kind of starts this next point. And I'm going to, again, for Scott Pigsley here. So clown warning, just real quick. But this is the point where he's really building those relationships in his neighborhood, getting involved in politics, did get voted into weird, obscure positions in local government kind of thing, nothing big. But he would also dress as Pogo the Clown, which is what's, really focused on a lot of times, especially any like documentary or horror movie based on it kind of thing. And like he did this, generally he had big parties like for the neighborhood and people in his backyard. And so he would sometimes dress as a clown for that, or he would do it for local kids' birthday parties sort of thing. Though he did do it in like a weird way, like how he painted. He would paint, like in clown school, they teach you to keep everything soft and round. And that's fun and that's, unintimidating. But if you make things pointy, like a triangle or something, that's more scary. And that's what comes off as scary. And all of his stuff was all points kind of thing.
Yeah, everything.
So 100% a terrifying looking clown. So, and that's all I have to say. You're okay now, Scott, about clowns.
Troy, thank you. Troy's in for one entry. Thank you, Troy.
Troy.
But, so he was just like really integrating himself and getting this positive image. And that's when he actually remarried to Carol Hoff only a couple years after this release. And I don't know if she knew about his previous conviction. She did, right? Okay, I thought so, but I was like, surely that's wrong, right?
No,
yeah, so she did know.
She did know why he was in prison.
And she did have 2 kids. So they got married and moved into this house, this very notorious house, together with the kids there and everything. And so they were together for, I think, around 5 years or so, but they got divorced in 1976. So if you remember, I mentioned at the beginning that these crimes were occurring between 1971 to the murders themselves, not including the horrible attacks he'd already done prior, from 1971 to 1979. So she and her children were in that house. I think at some point his mother-in-law was living with them actually for a small period during this point, and she talks about that smell. But there were other people in this house. But what became clear was that he just had this really explosive temper. Yeah. So he could be really sweet. I mean, you kind of expect this with this manipulative piece of crap that he is. Like, he could be very sweet. And then he could just really explode with anger, which is interesting because his father was the exact same way, where he would just explode with anger out of absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, and her kids kept saying that it was like a gross smell, and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's from a sewer pipe. Just dump some lime down there." So they just kept dumping lime down there.
Yeah, and as much as he did like the way his father treated him, his behaviors are really parallel to a lot of things his father did, with taking the lives of young boys and then the way he stored them, because his father also had a garage area that no one in the family could go in. No one at all. That was his space. No one could go in it. No one was allowed in it. And then his was the crawl space. That was his area. No one went down there. No one was allowed down there. Even
Bubble Wrap Bourbon says they were too scared to say shit. Agreed. That's probably exactly what it was.
Yeah. And it was the garage. He had like a garage and basement kind of area with a crawl space underneath. And it was like, but both those areas were absolutely, off limits for the wife. And like, it didn't matter that he's not at home and she's looking for a light bulb or something, and maybe it's in the garage. Like, absolutely not. You're not allowed. And I think she said she did enter the garage once, and it just was weird stuff. It was like red lights and things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
because she went in there once, and that's when she started noticing like the Young Men magazines and things like that he was bringing home. Because at first, when he was bringing them home, it was just kind of secretively, and he'd put them away. Later in their relationship, he got real brazen and just was like carrying them around like it was no big thing. He's like, it's just what it is. What it is.
Yep. Yeah. He had books. He had magazines of naked teenage boys.
And Carol is the one that lived there with her girls, and the big thing was his income that he was making and everything comparative for money today was about 6 figures. So even though he was like a horrible piece of crap, he was, taking care of her and her girls and, but he was never there. And that's what she was saying. He was like, he was paying for everything and he was never there. I never saw him really. He left all hours of the night. He, did weird things. And, and towards the end of their marriage, he was just like, yeah, I'm done being intimate with you. I want nothing to do with it. That's just the way it is. And it didn't really bother her because they never saw each other anyway. It just kind of turned into I don't know, kind of like a
weird roommate.
Like a weird roommate kind of.
So,
but they did eventually get divorced because of that.
We have a lot of stuff to get through. So, I'm going to kind of move on a little bit. In 1971, now he's starting to, like you said, he's like, I don't give a shit. I'm going now. Things are starting to escalate. He picks up a teenager that was sleeping on a bus bench at a bus stop. And he says, oh, I'm worried about you sleeping out in the cold. He takes it back to his house and he's like, hey, let's get busy. And the kid's like, no. So he tries to force him. The kid escapes, goes to the police. He's charged, but the kid didn't show up for court. So nothing happened. So that's February of 71. Then August of 71, him and his mother, because now he's divorced again because she got tired of his explosive temper and all his bullshit. So he moves back in with his mom, and then his mom and him get a house on Summerdale Avenue. This is where he starts his construction business, PDM contractors, and he's making that good money. He's building, like redoing pharmacies and stuff like that, commercial contracting. In January of 72, so about a year after that incident, Timothy McCoy, who was 16 at the time, he was his first murder victim. So now we've escalated. We're in a whole different level of shit. So he ends up stabbing this kid to death. He brings him home. They're drinking, they're watching porn, and it turns into something. Kid spends the night, and he sees the kid in the doorway holding a knife, and he stabs him. And then he's like, oh, my bad. He was just making me breakfast. Oops. Guess I shouldn't have stabbed him. Yeah. Damn, that was fun. I mean.
Yeah, like he says it was an accident, but that was where he discovered that was like the ultimate high for him, kind of the ultimate getting off kind of thing.
He said that's the rush I needed. So he puts his body into the crawl space, and they're asking, what's that smell? And he's like, oh, nothing. Don't worry about it. So that was the first murder. Then, so in July of 1972, he is charged with assault because he pretends to be a policeman and he forces a boy into his car. So, he assaults him, but then he lets him go. Doesn't kill him, just lets him go. But the kid didn't show up for court. So those charges got dismissed. Makes you wonder, is it embarrassment because it was the 70s that these kids just couldn't come forward? Was it them? Was it their parents? What happened there?
I feel like back then they didn't have the victim advocacy that they do now, to help victims who are going through something traumatic and then have to go and face, their attacker kind of thing is a big deal. And now we have like more support systems in place for that and checking back in with them to make sure that they show up when they're supposed to. I feel like back then they didn't have that. Plus the gay aspect of it. Like,
Agreed.
It's
absolutely.
But it also should have gone back to his parole. Like technically he was still on parole and those charges should have been reported back. But
and I think that's where the lack of like computers and stuff back then, I don't think things caught up in time for that stuff to play out.
So
that's why we had so many serial killers then.
One of the podcasts I listened to, they said that it 100% should have gone back to his probation officer. But they did say it is on the police officers to tell, because it happened in a different county. So to do the search, they have to find, and then they have to give the information over. And that kind of follow through just did not take place.
Yeah. So that was July of 72. So January of 74, there was an unidentified teen. And there are, how many, Jen? 5?
So there are 5 left. They just identified the last one in October of last year because there were 6. They identified another one in October.
Yeah. So there's still some that are unidentified. So this young man, he was roughly 14 to 18 years old, and he was the second murder victim. He was wrapped in a plastic bag after he was strangled and put into the crawl space. So that was July of 74 or January of 74. In 74 and 75 alone, there were multiple attempts to assault young men. He would offer to go party with them. And then he would be like, let me show you. I need that warning sign, Adriana. Where's your clown warning?
Sorry. Here we go.
Clown warning. So then he would say, let me show you my clown tricks. These magic tricks that I do as a clown. Okay, you're good to go. No more clown. Okay. So he would do a handcuff trick where he would put his hands behind his back, put handcuffs on, and leave one not all the way clipped shut. And then he would break free and say, that's my magic trick. Let me show you how to do it. Give me your hands. Then he would handcuff them. We all know where that goes.
Yeah.
So in July of 75, John Butkovich, I hope I said that right. Butkovich? Anyway, he worked for him for his construction company, and he went missing. They had an argument over some unpaid wages, and he later was identified as the third murder victim. So all of these are going under that crawl space of the house, just right under there. He was hiring young men to actually dig the trenches and stuff down there to put the bodies in, but they didn't know that's what they were doing.
Yeah, he hired several young men to do odd jobs and things around the house. But digging trenches, yard work, and stuff like that was really big. He'd have that happen a lot. Mm-hmm. I think one of them, he stated in his confession that kid didn't even know he had dug his own grave. Mm-hmm. And like laughed about it. And I was like, oh.
I was going to say, yeah, he fucking laughed when he said it.
So, so this went on for a couple of years. Time for a sign. In 1975 or 1976, David Cram moves in with Gacy, and he comes home and he finds Gacy in full-on clown gear as Pogo the Clown. So he's dressed all his clown makeup, all his glory, and he's like, "Hey, you want to do a handcuff trick?" And then Gacy pulls into him and says, "I'm going to assault you." And David got away, thank goodness. So imagine this big clown grabbing you and going, "I'm going to assault you." Well, that's why people are scared of clowns. I'm just saying.
Yeah. That is though the only. Yeah.
That's what.
Well, people have a sharp point, but I think that's the only one that we know of, at least, that he was actually like dressed up and all that was actually involved.
Yeah, he gets this whole rap about the killer clown because he used to dress up and do parties and do nonprofit things as part of his being a pillar of community.
Yeah, so
it's much more tangent.
Was that one time. I think they contributed the clown thing because of the handcuff trick and the rope trick and like all these different things that he learned being a clown. So I think they kind of overplayed that piece of it because he wasn't like every time he took out one of these young men that he was dressed in like full clown garb. It wasn't like that.
Yeah. And, I mean, so Lilith, yes, he did say assault. We have put the word assault in a little more often just because some of this stuff we don't really need to get into. It's icky. So, but yes, he did say, "I'm going to assault you."
Yeah.
And then, so after that, he, in 1976, there are 11 other victims murdered in 1976. They ranged from the age of 14 to 19, and they all went under that crawl space.
Which is such a typical, like, ramping up of a series, up and from 71 to 75, I think it was like 3 so far, 3 or 4. Yep. And then the next year, 11, but like it's.
Well, remember, in 76, he got divorced.
That's true.
So
That's
the
true.
wife
She was
there,
no longer around.
kids weren't there. So it was like a free for all. He was at this house by himself. He could bring whoever he wanted at whatever time. So he didn't have any restrictions. I mean, he really didn't have any before, obviously, but now it was like there was none. He had no restrictions.
Right now it's way easier.
Yeah.
And so he took advantage of that.
So yeah, he's ramping up. Then in 77, there's 8 more that are murdered, and they are ranging from 16 to 20. So you can see there's a trend on the ages that he likes, pretty much from 14 to 20. And they're going, I mean, he's racking up some numbers. They're all going underneath that crawl space. Like, they're crammed in there. There's so many in this space. At one point in time, he made a comment. He's like, they're like, well, what about these other ones? He's like, it wouldn't fit. There was no more room. So in January of 78, he assaults Robert Donnelly. And then in 78, he lures Jeff Rignall into his car to smoke pot. He's like, hey, let's get high. And then he uses chloroform to subdue him. And he assaults and tortures him and then dumps him in a park. So he didn't kill him.
He survived.
Yeah. So I'm not sure like what his train of thought was on when he kills them and when he doesn't, but he tortured the crap out of this kid and then dumped him in a park and let him live.
Yeah. He like woke up under a statue and made his way back to his apartment. His girlfriend took him to the hospital. He was actually in the hospital for 6 days before he was released. So he was actually the last known survivor of this time frame. So there were, I think, 5 or 6 survivors that actually testified at his trial. And it's pretty heartbreaking. So you always have to look at it as the ones that are no longer here. They don't have to deal with the mental trauma of dealing with that every day. And then the ones that are still here having to live with that on them. I couldn't imagine that. So it depends on what aspect you want to go. But Jeff Rignall was his last surviving person that he had grabbed.
And we never really got any answers as to why some were left alive and why some weren't.
No,
I think it was like a shift of the mood.
Yeah, he didn't really have any distinguishing things where he's like, if they made a certain sound or if they kicked him or if they were more violent or if they pushed back, like he didn't give any rhyme or reason of why he decided to kill certain ones and not others.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was one guy who worked for him who like, he hit him on the head with a hammer while he was helping him. And then the guy's like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, sorry. I don't know why. I just like wanted to hit you in the head with a hammer all of a sudden.
Yeah. He was like, I felt like I wanted to murder you and walked away.
Like, yeah. And then, and then the guy stayed working for him, like for a few months long, like just bizarre things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's why this case caught so much attention is not only were there so many victims, but the manner and the irrational, like some people would stay around him after it happened. Some people would stay with him wondering if this is what he was doing. Sometimes he'd kill him. Sometimes he'd let him go. Sometimes he was very affectionate. Sometimes he tortured him. There was really no rhyme or reason as to what happened. And then he had the one final victim that kind of put the nail in his coffin.
Yes. His last murder was Robert Piest. So, and that was in December 11th of 1978. Up to this point, a lot of the people, a lot of these young men that Gacy was grabbing weren't really close to their families. They worked odd jobs. They were trying to find money on their own, didn't have a great home life. So, it wasn't like right away when they're missing, they're going to look for them. Sometimes it took some time. A lot of these kids came to Chicago from other areas because, a lot of people are like, I want to try a big city. I'm going to go to Chicago. And they went by themselves. It was the 70s. So a lot of times 16-year-olds would, hitchhike and take off and, end up where they wanted to be. But with Robert, he was very well liked. He's very close to his family. He had lots of friends within the community. He actually worked at a local pharmacy drugstore. It was his mom's birthday. They were going to be going out, having cake. And so his mom went to pick him up after work. He came out and said he was going to go talk to a contractor about a better paying job. He said I know I can pay you more than what you're paying at the pharmacy. It's not going to be as long of hours, and you're going to make more money. So it sounded like a good opportunity to Robert. So Robert went off with Gacy, and he never came back. So the thing was that Gacy was at the pharmacy. So people saw him talking to Robert. People saw his vehicle. So it wasn't that people didn't know who it was. Like, he was out there. He was talking to him. It wasn't an issue at all. So after he didn't come home, they immediately were like, something's up, something's wrong. So let's start finding out what's going on. So they're finding out little bits of information back and forth. They finally are like, it was Gacy. Let's go talk to him. When they did the investigation into the pharmacy, the people that saw him talking to him there, getting into his car and all of this. So they go talk to Gacy. Gacy would say, yeah, I talked to Piest. We're going to work out a deal about him working on the house. But I let him go. I just don't know where he's at. He was here. I didn't guarantee him the job. It was more of a conversation. What actually happened was when he got Robert to the house, he said, is there anything that you wouldn't do for the right price? And so Robert just went back to him and said, I'll do some really hard work for you. Just let me know what it is and what the pay is going to be. And so Gacy went to his normal route. He said, hey, let's do the handcuff trick and see how this goes. And he did the handcuff trick, and he got on top of him, assaulted him, and he placed a rope around his neck while the teen was crying and just decided to take him out. And he actually was not placed in the crawl space. Because
he wasn't?
Huh?
He wasn't?
No.
Okay.
So he was the last one. So Gacy was running out of room at this point. So their crawl space is packed with like 27 bodies. So, and there's one under the garage. So he actually started to transport these bodies and throwing them into the Des Plaines River. Gacy said that he has thrown 5 into the river. He said one of them he didn't hear make a splash. So he said he figured it hit a barge. But so Robert Piest was actually found in the river. So he just didn't have any more room. So he had to start taking them and putting them into the river. So by December 13th of 78, they finally get a search warrant for Gacy's house and his vehicle. So they're like, something's up. This guy doesn't smell right. What's going on?
Nothing smells right at this point.
Exactly. So, and with Robert, one of the police officer's sons went to high school with him. And he was like, this kid's my son's age. I'm going to start looking into this on my own. Yeah. So when he started doing all the background checks on Gacy, and he's seeing all of these charges pop up over the past few years, and he's like, oh, hell no, something's really up. And so with all of this digging, they were able to get the search warrants for Gacy's house and his vehicles. They start doing surveillance on him. They start tracking him. They also find multiple driver's licenses of different people. They find a class ring and clothes that were obviously too small for Gacy to wear. And also found pot, porn, books on deviant types of acts that you could do, and plus a receipt for a roll of film from the pharmacy that Robert Piest had worked at. By December 15th, they say the reason that a bunch of his charges didn't populate was because there was a typo on John Wayne Gacy's actual name. So when they put in per his driver's license, they didn't come up.
Yeah, it was like John Gary or something.
Yeah. So it wasn't Gacy. It was Gary. So when they put Gacy in, nothing's coming up. So when they're starting to do more digging, they're like, oh shit, typo. Look at all this stuff on this guy. And then it's just like a treasure trove of, we need to get this guy. We need to get him quick. So by December 15th, they have all of his past convictions. They're starting to put everything together. Soon, Gary realizes he's being watched and at a very heavy rate. Every time he leaves his house, any type of movement, he's being watched. He does not like it. It's putting a damper on him, right? He's not able to go out and look for young men to, do what he needs to do. So he gets tired of the police and goes to his attorney to file a $750,000 civil suit against the investigators, stating that they're harassing him. They are ruining his reputation within the community, and he's not able to run his business. So they're hurting him financially, and he wants the surveillance to cease immediately. And he wants $750,000.
Wait, my favorite part of this, Jen, I just have to say this, is he made friends with these investigators.
Which...
he's like, hey guys, come have breakfast with me. Let's hang out.
So
he kept kind of mess with them, basically. He kept going up and chatting with them. And
look at all of the things that he's been getting away with. All the time he's been charged. No one comes to court, so he walks. He got a 10-year sentence. He served 2 years, and he walked. So his brain, he's like, I'm not going to get charged with this. I'm going to get $750,000 and I'm going to be golden and y'all are going to look stupid. And
grandiosity at its finest.
Yeah. The cojones on this bastard to sue the city and be like, no, you guys need to stop investigating me and you need to pay me money for causing me all this bullshit when you have 29 bodies buried under your
he was
and then
very
even the investigators, when they were interviewed later, they were like, we were tailing him and he would just come out and be like, hey, I'm gonna go have breakfast. If you have to follow me, come sit down. And they would talk. They said we had to keep reminding each other that he was a suspect, because if you didn't know that, you would want to like him and hang out with him.
Right. And he actually went, they followed him one day, and he actually went and sold pot right in front of them and got the money, got in his car and left. And they didn't arrest him because they're like, the surveillance we're doing for all of the other stuff is way more important than this tiny little bag of weed that he just, sold this guy.
Although at this point, they were still mainly investigating Robert Peace.
They didn't know about all the other ones.
Yeah. No. At this point, they're still, I think they found his body finally.
Yeah.
They just suspected him for the one. They had that strong connection and suspicion for the one.
For just one.
The rest was
only looking for
terrible surprise.
So I haven't, now that Adriana's on our stream, I'm reading the chat and I'm getting some giggles out of it. But seriously,
I know, right?
I'm curious in chat, if you were following this guy and you think he's only killed one person, but he's being such a blatant, grandiose guy, I mean, what do you do at that point? Do you go have breakfast with him, or do you go, hey, dirtbag, what are you trying to do? What do you do at that point, really?
No.
Absolutely.
You give that guy but anybody who's that chill and casual about being investigated for something awful, you should, if you're being investigated and you're actually innocent, you should be trying to prove that you're innocent and being, as unsuspicious as possible.
There's a statement that I've heard on several things that's like, you can tell if somebody's guilty when they're in jail if they sleep soundly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Somebody who can fall asleep. Yeah.
They're probably guilty on that. But
there were times they lost him completely. He was really good at slipping out, because he would have his workers and stuff drive his van up, and then he'd go out in a different car because he had all these company vehicles.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what made it hard to track on some, because he had a black Oldsmobile at one time. because Rignall actually, when he went to the police after he was out of the hospital, told them everything that happened. But unfortunately, because it was the 70s, and because he was actually openly gay as well, they're just like, yeah, whatever, we don't believe you. That's a bunch of shit. So Rignall actually did his own investigation and like was looking for this Black Oldsmobile, and he found it, followed Gacy to the house, got the address, then went back to the police and said, here's the guy that did it. Here's his car. Here's his house. Gave it to him. And they're like, all right, thanks. And did nothing about it.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Not a damn thing.
You know, and it seems
Jeff
like
Rignall breaks my heart.
It does.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. It sucks.
It seems like in these cases, there's always that moment where we can sit here and judge and go, how did the police miss that? How did they drop the ball? Well, maybe without that foresight, I mean, I don't know. I want to sit here and go, hey, ding dongs. But in reality,
I think for some of the things, like absolutely you can give it, especially when you think about the technology at that point, you know, whatever else they might have had on their plate, kind of thing. But when this man has been in the hospital for 6 days and is as traumatized as he was, and I mean the horrors, I mean, we're very much and on purpose gliding over the torture that Gacy inflicted on his victims, but it was absolutely intense. And the thing of horror movies,
it was horrific.
that this guy had survived, and he's telling you that was not consensual. No, that he was in the hospital with these horrible injuries for 6 days that he then went and self-investigated further to try and make it easier. Like at that point, that's where the culture of the era is coming in and being like, ooh, we don't want to get involved in some kind of, you know, gay relationship thing. And it's like, this isn't about a gay relationship. This is sexual assault. This has nothing to do with a person's preference or sexuality or anything. Like,
and Lilith Morgan is right. And Lil, that's part of the reason why we aren't going into a lot of the details is, you know, we love this stream and we love telling these stories as accurately as we can, but we also want to avoid some of the nasty things that can come out in comments because these families have gone through so much, and it's the dirty details just aren't needed. We just need to know that he was a horrible man that did some horrible things to some people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you can dig into it, just like we did. If you want to go into the nitty gritty of it, I don't recommend it. It's not a good read.
Our sources are in the description, so you're welcome to dig into that with our sources in the description. We've got the recipe for the cocktail in the description. So there's anything you could need that you want to dive into, it is available for you to do that.
Absolutely.
So, so at this point, they've been investigating him for a while, and they're just having a heck of a time. So they get the search warrant for his house and his vehicles. They found some odd shit in his house, like not what they needed, but definitely some odd shit. Yeah,
just some weird, homemade toys, things of that nature. The smell was like the biggest thing. So even so these are trained investigators that have been around it. One of his last fatal errors that he did was invite the investigators into the house to eat. So not like at a restaurant, like, oh, hey, you follow me to the Denny's. You want to get, you want to get a moons over my hammy and some coffee and we'll chit chat. It was at the house. So the investigator goes into the bathroom. And at this point it's cold in Chicago. And he said that the heat kicked on and he said, you could just smell it. And he was like, I have been in a morgue. I have been around this. It's a very distinct smell. And he was like, there was no denying it. And he was like, and that's everything they needed.
Can you imagine you're in the restroom and all of a sudden you're like, what is that? Ew. Oh my gosh.
Right.
I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that he did because it got him out there a little bit quicker. The investigators on December 20th of 78 actually talked to two of the survivors, Cram, I believe. Yes. So they talked to Cram and Rossi, which was two of his survivors about what had happened, kind of get more information on what was going on, the types of things they did, the types of things he said to them, and all of that. With this information, they were able to go get Gacy. They were able to pick him up. Hey, it's time for us to have a conversation. They stated that when they spoke to him, he was extremely drunk. Like he had drank a bunch, and he confessed to 33 murders. But he not only confessed to the investigators, he confessed to a friend of his, and he told one other individual. And he was like, I killed all these people. And they're like, well, why'd you do that? And they're like, oh, well, they were after me and my family. And that's what he was telling one person. And then when he told the one friend, he was like, I'm out. Like, we need to go talk to somebody. Yeah. So then the investigators got him, and he confessed to the 33 murders.
It's like all of a sudden, after like playing this cat and mouse game, and he was toying with them, and all of a sudden he's like, yeah, I did it. I killed 33 of them. Because he liked to talk. He was so grandiose. He loved to be like, you guys are stupid. And he would talk about, all the things he did in the community and how important he was. And then he killed these 33 people. And
it was pretty gnarly. So he confessed to this. He actually drew a map of where all of the bodies were. When they were taking them out, obviously they said that they were put in a specific way. Like there was some that were all the way up to where the front door was, where the police were standing. There were.
And he drew that map like almost piece by piece under that house. He knew exactly where everybody was, how it was positioned, and how they all fit like Tetris under that house.
Right. And then another portion of the bodies were under like where a big fire pit and stuff was, where he'd have like big barbecues and hangouts, and all of these individuals would be coming over for these parties and not even knowing that is there. So it was pretty bad. On February 18th of 79, Robert Stein testified that all the bodies recovered from Gacy's property were decomposed skeletal remains. 13 of the victims had died of asphyxiation, 6 of strangulation, and 1 was stabbed, and there was 10 that were undetermined. And that was due to the state of decomp, because it was mostly skeletal remains, so they weren't able to pinpoint a cause because there wasn't any damage done to the actual bones themselves for them to say definite cause of death on those. On February 21st, Jeffrey Rignall, who we've been talking about, who was in the hospital and all of this, got up the nerve to testify at Gacy's trial. He said on the stand about the beastly and animalistic ways that he was attacked by Gacy, and physically vomited all over the stand and had to be carried out of the room. And he wasn't the only one. There was another gentleman that also tried to testify against him, and he also had to leave because of how emotionally distraught he was at seeing him there and them wanting him to relive what had happened, and he couldn't get through it. And so he left. He was like, I can't do it. So he went off the stand as well.
That's so sad.
It is.
It's heartbreaking. Those poor survivors, and it's a time without advocacy like that and support.
So Donald Voorhees and Robert Donnelly also testified against him at court as well. So I definitely give kudos to those gentlemen for getting up there and telling that story, especially during that time frame when things were so bad for the gay community.
It's hard to do it now. I mean, it's hard to do it now. Back then, I mean, kudos to these guys. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so that's good for them.
And clearly their statements made a really strong impact, because if you listen to true crime and through the trial parts and things, a lot of times, there can be ridiculous endings, or the jury can take forever to go, especially if there's multiple murders like this. This is a trial for 33 murders.
Yeah.
And it took the jury only 2 hours to deliberate over it. And he was sentenced to death for each murder. So none of this bullshit, you're getting out after 18 months sort of thing again.
You have your innings. You're giving
this time this time it didn't matter how well behaved you were going to be. He was sentenced to death. As per usual, his execution was scheduled. It was scheduled for 1980 originally, but there's always an appeal process and everything. So he did end up being on death row for 14 years. But his appeals just kept getting denied. I don't really know what the grounds for his appeals were. I never really care. You're guilty. Like, this is coming your way, buddy. Like, guess what? It was not, for once, justice was actually done. This was not overturned. And his final appeal was denied in 1993. And he was executed in 1994 on May 10th. And so this was by lethal injection in Illinois. So that went through. He's no longer around, thank God. No clown killer anymore. There are like a couple of different, supposed last words by him. One is, killing me will not bring back your loved ones. But the one that is sort of the most claimed and notorious for him is kiss my ass.
And that's that grandiosity, Yeah.
He wanted to go out cool.
Of what I looked at, it was kiss my ass. So that's
what I've seen.
But the good news is, I mean, there was closure brought to all but a few of these families. A lot of times in these massive serial killings, there's so many victims that go unidentified because they didn't have the means that they have today. When you get a confession like that and he says, here's the bodies, here's the deal. I mean, it's horrific what happened, but at least those families know, I think it sucks they have to know all the details, but at least they know what happened to their loved one. They're not just missing.
Yeah. So a lot of them, they were able to identify through the 80s. And then there were 7. Then in 2011, they identified William Bundy, and he had been missing since 1977. You had James Heckinson. He was identified finally in July of 2017, and he had been missing since 1976. And then in October of 2001, Francis Alexander was identified from DNA in a tooth that was found, and that was because his siblings actually put their DNA into the system for them to run through. And so they were able to identify him, and he had been missing since 1976. So both of his parents had already passed. His siblings were in their 50s, and they didn't know from 1976 until October of last year, what had happened to their loved one. And so they do press a lot on the podcast that if you do have someone that was missing within that time frame in that area, and if you do want to give your DNA, definitely do. There are still 5 that are unidentified. One is from either 72 or 75. And then they believe that person is between 14 and 18. Then June and August of 76, they had found another one. And he was between the ages of 23 and 30. And he was actually the oldest one that they had found within all of the bodies that Gacy had. And then the other 3 were between August of 76 and July of 77. And they're between the ages of 17 and 22. And those were also found in the crawl space. So the 4 that were found in the river were already identified. So the last 5 that need to be identified were in the crawl space. So it's going to be a little bit harder because there's really not that much to test on now. But they do suggest that if you do have a loved one within that time frame and area, to maybe go ahead and give your DNA and give it a shot just to see if your loved one.
And even if not that close to that area, because they do say that they, think he picked up some, at train stations and things. So he was very much looking for, the victims that quote unquote won't be missed kind of thing, or basically are less likely to be reported and less likely to be, which is where he really screwed up in the end, it was somebody who was very much expected within a few hours and was being looked for and had witnesses and everything. But normally, and lots of, killers do this, is try and go after people that if they're missing, it's almost expected, because it's just like, well, he didn't tell us where he was going, and we haven't heard from him for years. We don't know where he went. But yeah.
Yeah, and there's actually a lot of missing persons from the 60s to the 80s because of the transient nature, because, it was a lot of hitchhiking, like, hey, I'm going to go down the highway and go to the city. It was very much a way of travel back then. So there's a lot of missing people because they just don't know where they are. And when they're found and their families don't know, they just are like, oh, well, at this point, we can either assume that, they've passed away and just kind of deal with it that way, or just assume that, they decided to go their own way and build their own life, and hopefully they're living a happy existence. But there's a lot of missing persons out there, and there's a lot of unidentified people that they can't put any names to because they just don't have the DNA, or they don't have the representation in order to push for DNA. And that's the other big thing that they're trying to do right now.
Yeah. I do think it's awesome though that they are still, actually pushing and trying to identify these victims, and it's been so long, but they care. Yeah. I mean, the fact that we just got another one identified last year is just like, or 2 years ago, like just goosebumps. I mean, that's just so awesome that they're still making progress on this case.
Yeah, and I think that's like the best thing about technology at this point is that we're able to pinpoint so much more time frames, DNA, all different types of fluids and things that we just didn't have at the disclosure that we do now. And so that's really going to help, but we have to be able to put that new technology into the information and the evidence that you have with old cases. So a lot of times they are pushing for DNA from family or extended family just to try to close out some of these cases and get some of these remains identified and get them to their home where they should be.
So real quick, I want to say we've got 3 minutes left in the giveaway. We're going to do 3 drawings for sample packs. First sample pack is going to be 3 separate samples of 3 different Bookers, along with a sample of Drunken Bean. Then we're going to do 3 separate samples, one of E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof, one of the E.H. Taylor Straight Rye, and one of the small batch. And then we're going to do 3 different samples of Stag Juniors. And so every $5 gets you into that. We've got 3 minutes left on it. And then we're going to go ahead and randomize and pick those 3 winners. We did run a little long tonight. I appreciate all you guys hanging out with us. I have to give a huge shout out to Scott Pigsley, because I know he's terrified of clowns, and he said he wasn't coming, and he hung out through the whole thing. Good job.
Cheers to you, Scott. Thanks for sticking around.
Yeah. And Bourbon Bites, Clifton, you asked something earlier, and I wanted to clarify about why couldn't they just arrest him on that pot charge. That was actually like kind of on the last day of him sort of going out, and he met up with a couple different people. And the last one was when he like confessed to, but basically they saw him do this and they were like, but we want to like see if we can't, he was unraveling, and they were like, we want to see what evidence we can, pot is a very small charge. We want to see what we could really get on this guy. Yeah, where will he lead us? And then once all of that happened, then they were like, now we have the pot charge in our pocket that we have grounds to actually arrest him on and can start interrogating him. And that's when, so that's why it was like, it sounded disconnected, but it was all one thing.
Well,
welcome, Scott. I thought of that during the
Imagine Junction. Searched his house once, so they'd already been in the house.
Yeah. Well, and I know that the first time that they came and asked him about his last victim, Robert Peace, he was in the attic. Like Gacy hadn't gotten rid of the body yet, and he couldn't bury it anymore. He'd already run out of space and been having to drop bodies into the Des Plaines River. And he was supposed to come to the police, department, whatever, to come and answer questions, but, voluntarily sort of thing. It was still early on. And then he didn't show up till like 2 or 3 in the morning, covered in mud. And it was because he had gone off and gotten rid of the body at the bridge.
Yeah.
And was covered in mud, and then showed up at the police, department.
Yeah.
Hours and hours after he said he would, like, okay, now I can talk to you guys. And
yeah,
we just talked about a job.
Yeah.
But...
He's like, did you still want to talk to me?
Yeah. And they're like, yeah, like, where you been?
Okay, so we're on the half hour. Ben, if you want to let us know how many entries, what our number is, we'll do a final call. And then real quick, I want to touch again on next week. Super exciting mega merch giveaway. We've been working on this for a while. It's a fundraiser for CASA GAL Child Advocates. They are the voice of children that have been a victim of neglect or abuse. They're overlooked so very much for fundraising and donations and such. So we'd really like to get a big showing. So many channels have reached out. I just had 3 more reach out tonight. They're going to be throwing in their merch, everything from t-shirts to barrel picks, sample packs, glasses, all of it. Some channels are giving away huge packs, and we're going to be putting all this together. We'll have multiple drawings. Again, that's next Wednesday on our live. I really hope, even if you guys don't enter the drawing, just come support this cause. This is a huge thing to our hearts, and we'd love to see you show up for it.
Absolutely.
There will definitely be Whiskey Mountains merch. I don't have any picks, but there'll be some merch donated for that for sure. So, and also that one's not, I think a lot of people think this channel just does like true crime cases every week. And it's like, no, like most of the weeks are whiskey focused. So that will be another of the mini whiskey focused streams. So don't worry if you don't like clowns or anything.
Yeah, so it's the 4th Wednesday of every month is our Criminals and Cocktails series, but we are live every Wednesday doing everything from blinds to reviews to just hanging out with friends. We are just a couple of women sitting around enjoying our friends in the whiskey community, and we enjoy a little true crime and murder on the 4th Wednesday of every month. So
absolutely.
And if you'd like some voting power on what cases we cover, just check out our Patreon. For as little as $4, you can help vote on that.
And Lil, I want to say one of the cases that was up in the vote was an Australian case.
Yeah.
So I did put that out there. I put an English case too. Also,
interesting Australian cases out there.
Yeah, there's some really good ones. So yeah.
So Ben, do we have a range of numbers at this point? I know it's getting late over there on the East Coast. I'm Mountain Time, so it's not quite as bad for me.
28.
Bill
it looks
says
like
she did see that and she did vote for it.
Okay. Chad. Right. Although I was like personally pushing for the Mary Vincent case, the survivor, but I understand that one's not as well known. But it's a doozy of a case. It's a unique one. A lot of people haven't heard of. So.
Okay, so I like
finding cases. It gives me something
to
research.
Something unique
like I know about, and I can go back and get like nitty gritty kind of things. But cases I haven't heard about or new ones, I really like to dig into.
Yeah. Richie, thank you. Cheers.
Cheers to you. Oh, and Adriana, thank you so much for coming on, and it's been awesome having you.
It was so much fun. I've been looking forward to this forever.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Okay, and with that, Adriana, we have numbers 1 through 28. So as our special guest, would you pick a number for us?
I'm always the person asking for the numbers. This is awesome. Or not asking for them, but so 7. 7's my favorite number. So 7.
All right, Ben, go ahead and randomize that, and we'll get number 7 here. We're doing 3 drawings. This will be the first drawing for the sample pack of Booker's.
Lil, how cool would that be to have Lil come on and do Ivan Milat?
Ooh, that would be awesome.
That would be so good.
That would be great.
You need to message us or email us so that we remember that, because I think that's a great idea.
Absolutely. I would
Bourbon
totally.
Bites. Congratulations. Bourbon Bites is the winner of the Bourbon Sample Pack.
Congratulations.
With a bonus sample of the Drunken Bean so he can make that cocktail.
The Drunken
The
Bean?
cocktail is legit. And I know Clifton likes cocktails. He might like it. Might be a little on the sweet side, but you can always play with that. But the cocktail's legit good, Clifton.
Just
or you can have it instead of a mimosa for breakfast. You could have one of those.
Right?
And I actually think it would be really good if it was just chilled and not on the rocks and just thrown like in a martini glass with maybe a little extra shot of whiskey.
Yeah, I might need a little more. A little extra kick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jen, will you pick the number for the E.H. Taylor sample pack?
Sure. I'm going to do 24.
24. Ben, if you would randomize.
Bubbles, I also added extra.
Bourbon, he made the cocktail. He added a little bit extra of the coffee liqueur, and he said he really liked it.
Ah, nice.
Yeah. That really helped it present itself and balance out the sweetness a little. That was good. I will be making this cocktail for sure again.
That with us, because I love it when we have people in chat that are actually drinking the cocktail with us.
Absolutely.
Question for those of you in chat: is it easier if we just post the ingredients and we make it on stream, or did you like having the video out ahead of time? Because we're still kind of playing with this and figuring out what you guys like.
Oh, number 24 is J-Max.
Woohoo!
That's for Maxwell.
J-Max, I don't think I have your address. If you could please email womenofwhiskies@gmail.com, then we will get that pack out to you.
And it is whiskeys, plural.
Whiskeys, plural, yes.
Yeah, it's an easy thing to miss.
And Clifton, I don't think I have your address either. So if you wouldn't mind messaging me or emailing me yours, I'll get that out as well.
Nope. Scott Pigsley said the video ahead of time.
Okay.
I agree. I think that does make it helpful.
Let's see. Lila said the mini video is good, but need a better angle.
Oh, to see the actual
mixing.
Oh, pouring and mixing.
Your hands like.
Okay. Good feedback. That is good to know. So I will work on that next time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I'm excited. We're getting a new camera.
Yay. The final drawing is going to be for 3 different of the Stag Juniors. So, and then the bonus Drunken Bean. And I'm going to pick number 3.
Ooh, that's
so go ahead and randomize that, Ben, and tell us number 3.
Yeah. Buddy.
Meanwhile, you guys, thank you so much for hanging so long.
Yes, absolutely.
If you haven't had a chance to hit the like button, that little bit is a great free way to help our channel support us so we can grow. Even better, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, hit subscribe and the notification bell, and it will let you know when we're going live. Please subscribe. That is huge to us. We are growing. We are excited. And, our Patreon is helping us out buying things like the things for the cocktails and stuff like that. So thank you for all of your support.
And tell your friends to subscribe. They're getting so close to 500. I just looked. It looks like you're at 481 now. So, and I think it was 477 before the stream.
Yeah,
so
awesome. Hey, Lil, you won.
Lilith, it is you.
Right.
Yay.
Yay.
Lil.
So, Lil, we'll chat in the next couple days. We'll get that figured out. Congratulations.
Yay, Lilith. Awesome.
I am super excited to give free stuff away. It really isn't so much about the entries. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the donations help us be able to do this. But all of you that know us, Jen, Adriana as well, myself, we truly believe in whiskey being shared with friends. And, like I've always said, drink it how you like it. There's no wrong way to drink it. Drink it with your friends. So the best way to do that is for us to just give away free whiskey.
That's why you drink it.
That's the funnest part of drinking whiskey is other people drinking it with you and getting to hang out.
Absolutely.
And talk to your crowd.
Adriana, thank you so much for coming on the stream. It was really fun. I know we talked about it. I know we've been excited about it, but it was great to see your insight on the case that you picked, that you liked. It was kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, you already know I've been a huge fan and supporter of this since before it started. Mm-hmm. So like I love the whole idea of this, and then also having the true crime, once a month kind of thing, like women being involved in whiskey and seeing each other, being involved in whiskey is the coolest. And then also, little side hobby of true crime. Yeah. It's the perfect combo for me. So I loved it. Thank you so much. This was great.
I'm so happy you came on. It was awesome. I'm so glad you did.
Thanks.
Okay, friends, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And cheers. We will see you next Wednesday, if not before. Like, subscribe, hit the notifications. Check out Whiskey Mountains, Adriana's channel.
Absolutely.
She goes hiking, does reviews, and is just an all-around fun chick to watch on her videos.
Absolutely.
So check her out.
Great whiskey and a beautiful person. Check out Adriana.
Here's that.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Salud.